Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we are continuing with my Read Aloud series for the Twilight Saga, where I read all of the Twilight books aloud on this channel, and we are continuing with Midnight Sun by Stephenie Meyer, which is Twilight but in Edward's point of view, and we're continuing with chapter 11, which is called Interrogations. But before we begin the reading, I just have to make the quick disclaimer that I do not own any of the text being presented here, nor am I trying to present any of it as my own. This is simply a read aloud that I'm doing on this channel for entertainment purposes, and all rights go to Stephenie Meyer. This is all in fair use. So again, this is Midnight Sun by Stephenie Meyer, Chapter 11, Interrogations. CNN broke the story first. I was glad it hit the news before I had to leave for school. I was anxious to hear how the humans would phrase the account and what amount of attention it would garner. Luckily, it was a heavy news day. There was an earthquake in South America and a political kidnapping in the Middle East, so it ended up only earning a few seconds, a few sentences, and one grainy picture. Orlando Calderas Wallace, suspected murderer wanted in the states of Texas and Oklahoma, was apprehended last night in Portland, Oregon, thanks to an anonymous tip. Wallace was found unconscious in an alley early this morning, just a few yards from a police station. Officials are unable to tell us at this time whether he will be extradited to Houston or Oklahoma City to stand trial. The picture was unclear. A mugshot, and he'd had a thick beard at the time of the photograph. Even if Bella saw it, she would probably not recognize him. I hoped she wouldn't. It would only frighten her needlessly. The coverage here in town will be light. It's too far away to be considered of local interest, Alice told me. It was a good call to have Carlisle take him out of state. I nodded. Bella didn't watch much TV regardless, and I'd never seen her father watching anything besides sports channels. I'd done what I could. This repugnant creature no longer hunted, and I was not a murderer. Not recently, anyway. I'd been right to trust Carlisle, as much as I wished the wretch had not gotten off quite so easily. I caught myself hoping he would be extradited to Texas, where the death penalty was so popular. No, that didn't matter. I would put this behind me and concentrate on what was most important. I'd left Bella's room less than an hour ago. I was already aching to see her again. Alice, do you mind? She cut me off. Rosalie will drive. She'll act pissed, but you know she'll enjoy the excuse to show off her car. Alice trilled a laugh. I grinned at her. See you at school. Alice sighed, and my grin became a glare. I know, she thought. Not yet. I'll wait until you're ready for Bella to know me. You should know, though, this isn't just me being selfish. Bella's going to like me, too. I didn't answer her as I hurried out the door. That was a different way of viewing the situation. Would Bella want to know Alice? To have a vampire for a girlfriend? Knowing Bella, that idea probably wouldn't bother her in the slightest. I frowned to myself. What Bella wanted and what was best for Bella were two very separate things. I started to feel uneasy as I parked my car in Bella's driveway. The human adage said that things looked different in the morning, that things changed when you slept on them. Would I look different to Bella in the weak light of a foggy day, more or less sinister than I had in the blackness of night? Had the truth sunk in while she slept? Would she finally be afraid? Her dreams had been peaceful, though, last night. When she'd spoken my name time and time again, she'd smiled. More than once, she'd murmured a plea for me to stay. Would that mean nothing today? I waited, nervously, listening to the sounds of her inside the house. The fast, stumbling footsteps on the stairs, the sharp rip of a foil wrapper, the contents of the refrigerator crashing against each other when the door slammed. It sounded as though she was in a hurry, anxious to get to school. The thought made me smile. Hopeful again. I glanced at the clock. I suppose that, taking into account the velocity of her decrepit truck, must limit her to. She was running a little late. Belle rushed out of the house, her book bag sliding off her shoulder, her hair coiled into a messy twist that was already coming apart on the nape of her neck. The thick green sweater she wore was not enough to keep her thin shoulders, from hunching against the cold fog. The long sweater was too big for her, unflattering. It masked her slender figure, turning all her delicate curves and soft lines into a shapeless jumble. I appreciated this almost as much as I wished that she had worn something more like the soft blue blouse she had on last night. The fabric had clung to her skin in such an appealing way, cut low enough to reveal the mesmerizing shape of her collarbones, curling out from the hollow of her throat. The blue had flowed like water along the subtle shape of her body. It was better, essential, that I kept my thoughts far, far away from that shape, so I was grateful for the unbecoming sweater. I couldn't afford to make mistakes, and it would be a monumental mistake to dwell on the strange hungers that thoughts of her lips, her skin, her body were shaking loose inside me. Hungers that had evaded me for 100 years, but I could not allow myself to think of touching her, because that was impossible. I would break her. Bella turned away from the door in such a hurry that she nearly ran right by my car without noticing it. Then she skidded to a stop, her knees locking like a startled colt's. Her bag slid further down her arm, and her eyes flew wide as they focused on the car. I got out, taking no care to move at human speed, and opened the passenger door for her. I would not try to deceive her anymore. When we were alone, at least, I would be myself. She looked up at me, startled again as I seemingly materialized out of the fog, and then the surprise in her eyes changed to something else, and I was no longer afraid or hopeful that her feelings for me had changed in the course of the night. Warmth, wonder, fascination all swam in the translucent depths of her eyes. "Do you want to ride with me today?" I asked. Unlike dinner last night, I would let her choose. From now on, it must always be her choice. "Yes, thank you," she murmured, climbing into my car without hesitation. Would it ever cease to thrill me that I was the one she was saying yes to? I flashed around the car, eager to join her. She showed no sign of being shocked by my sudden reappearance. The happiness I felt when she sat beside me this way had no precedent. As much as I enjoyed the love and companionship of my family, despite the various entertainments and distractions my world had to offer, I had never been happy like this. Even knowing that it was wrong, that this couldn't possibly end well, could not keep the smile from my face for long when we were together. My jacket was folded over the headrest of her seat. I saw her eyeing it. "I brought the jacket for you," I told her. This was my excuse, had I needed to provide one, for showing up uninvited this morning. It was cold. She had no jacket. Surely this was an acceptable form of chivalry. "I didn't want you to get sick or something. I'm not quite that delicate," she said, staring at my chest rather than my face, as if she were hesitant to meet my eyes. But she put the coat on before I could resort to coaxing or begging. "Aren't you?" I muttered to myself. She looked out at the road as I accelerated toward the school. I could only stand the silence for a few seconds. I had to know what her thoughts were this morning. So much had changed between us since the last time the sun was up. "What, no 20 questions today?" I asked, keeping it light again. She smiled, seeming glad that I had broached the subject. "Do my questions bother you?" "Not as much as your reactions do," I told her honestly, smiling in response to hers. Her mouth turned down. "Do I react badly?" "No, that's the problem. You take everything so coolly. It's unnatural. Not one scream so far. How could that be?" "It makes me wonder what you're really thinking." Of course, everything she did or didn't do made me wonder that. "I always tell you what I'm thinking." "You edit." Her teeth pressed into her lip again. She didn't seem to notice when she did this. It was an unconscious response to tension. "Not very much." Just those words were enough to have my curiosity raging. What did she purposely keep from me? "Enough to drive me insane," I said. She hesitated, then whispered, "You don't want to hear it." I had to think for a moment, run through our entire conversation last night, word for word, before I made the connection. Perhaps it took so much concentration because I couldn't imagine anything that I wouldn't want her to share with me. And then, because the tone of her voice was the same as last night, there was suddenly pain there again. I remembered. Once I had asked her not to speak her thoughts. "Never say that." I'd all but snarled at her. I had made her cry. Was this what she kept from me? The depth of her feelings about me? That my being a monster didn't matter to her? And that she thought it was too late for her to change her mind? I was unable to speak. because the joy and pain were too strong for words, the conflict between them too wild to allow for a coherent response. It was silent in the car, except for the steady rhythms of her heart and lungs. "Where's the rest of your family?" she asked suddenly. I took a deep breath, registering the scent in the car with true pain for the first time. I was getting used to this, I realized with satisfaction, and forced myself to be casual again. "They took Rosalie's car." I parked in the open spot next to the car in question. I hid my smile as I watched her eyes grow round. "Ostentatious, isn't it?" Wow. If she is that, why did she ride with you?" Rosalie would have enjoyed Bella's reaction if she were being objective about Bella, which probably wouldn't happen. Like I said, it's ostentatious. We try to blend in. Of course, Bella was totally oblivious to the inherent contradiction of my own car. It was no accident we were most often seen in the Volvo, a car celebrated above all for its safety. Safety, the one thing vampires would never need from a vehicle. Few would recognize the less common racing edition, not to mention the aftermarket work we'd done. "You don't succeed," she told me, and then she laughed a carefree laugh. The blithe, wholly untroubled sound of her laughter warmed my hollow chest. "So why did Rosalie drive today if it's more conspicuous?" she wondered. Hadn't she noticed? I'm breaking all the rules now. My answer should have been mildly frightening. So of course Bella smiled at it. Once out of the car, I walked as close to her as I dared, watching carefully for any sign that my proximity upset her. Twice her hand twitched toward me and she snatched it back. It looked like she wanted to touch me. My breath sped. "Why do you have cars like that at all, if you're looking for privacy?" she asked as we walked. "An indulgence," I admitted. "We all like to drive fast." "Figures," she mumbled, her tone sour. She didn't look up to see my answering grin. "Nuh-uh, I don't believe this. How the hell did Bella pull this off?" Jessica's mental boggling interrupted my thoughts. She was waiting for Bella, taking refuge from the rain under the edge of the cafeteria's roof, with Bella's winter jacket over her arm. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. Bella noticed her too in the next moment. A faint pink touched her cheek when Bella registered Jessica's expression. "Hey, Jessica, thanks for remembering." Bella greeted her. Jessica handed her the jacket wordlessly. I would be polite to Bella's friends, whether or not they were good friends. "Good morning, Jessica." Whoa. Jessica's eyes popped even wider, but she did not flinch or take a step back as I expected. Though she'd often found me alluring in the past, she'd always kept a safe distance before, the way all our admirers unconsciously did. It was strange and amusing, and honestly, a bit embarrassing to realize how much being near Bella had softened me. It seemed as though no one was afraid of me anymore. If Emmett found out about this, he would be laughing for the next century. Hi," Jessica mumbled, and her eyes flashed to Bella's face, full of significance. "I guess I'll see you in Trig." "You are so going to spill details. I have to have details. Edward freaking Cullen!" Bella's mouth twitched. Yeah, I'll see you then." Jessica's thoughts ran wild as she hurried to her first class, peeking back at us now and then. "The whole story. I'm not accepting anything else. Did they plan to meet up last night? Are they dating? How long? How could she keep this a secret? Why would she want to? It can't be a casual thing. She has to be seriously into him. I will find out. I wonder if she's made out with him? Oh, swoon." Jessica's thoughts were suddenly disjointed, and she let wordless fantasies swirl through her head. I winced at her speculations, and not just because she'd replaced Bella with herself in the mental pictures. I couldn't be like that. And yet, I resisted making the admission, even to myself. In how many wrong ways would I want Bella? Which one would end up killing her? I shook my head and tried to lighten up. "What are you going to tell her?" I asked Bella. "Hey," she whispered fiercely. "I thought you can read my mind." "I can't." I stared at her, surprised, trying to make sense of her words. We must have been thinking the same thing at the same time. "However," I told her, "I can read hers. She'll be waiting to ambush you in class." Bella groaned and then let the jacket slide off her shoulders. I didn't realize that she was giving it back at first. I wouldn't have asked for it. I would rather she kept it. A token. So I was too slow to offer her my help. She handed me the jacket and put her arms through her own. "So what are you going to tell her?" I pressed. "A little help? What does she want to know?" I smiled and shook my head. I wanted to hear what she was thinking without a prompt. That's not fair. Her eyes tightened. No, you not sharing what you know. Now that's not fair. Right, she didn't like double standards. She wants to know if we're secretly dating, I said slowly. And she wants to know how you feel about me. Her eyebrows shot up, not startled but ingenuous now, playing innocent. Yikes, she murmured. What should I say? She always tried to make me give away more than she did. I pondered how to respond. A wayward lock of her hair, slightly damp from the fog, draped across her shoulder and curled around the place where her collarbone was hidden by the ridiculous sweater. It drew my eyes, pulled them across the other hidden lines. I reached for it carefully, not touching her skin. The morning was chill enough without my touch, and twisted it back into the place in her untidy bun so that it wouldn't distract me again. I remembered when Mike Newton had touched her hair, and my jaw flexed at the memory. She had flinched away from him then. Her reaction now was nothing the same. Instead, there was a rush of blood under her skin and a sudden, uneven thumping of her heart. I tried to hide my smile as I answered her question. I suppose you could say yes to the first, if you don't mind. Her choice, always her choice. It's easier than any other explanation. I don't mind, she whispered. Her heart had not found its normal rhythm yet. And as for her other question, I couldn't hide my smile now. Well, I'll be listening to hear the answer to that one myself. Let Bella consider that. I held back my laugh as shock crossed her face. I turned quickly before she could ask any more questions. I had a difficult time not giving her whatever she asked for, and I wanted to hear her thoughts, not mine. I'll see you at lunch, I called back to her over my shoulder, an excuse to check that she was still staring after me. Her mouth was hanging open. I turned again and laughed. As I paced away, I was vaguely aware of the shocked and speculative thoughts that swirled around me, eyes bouncing back and forth between Bella's face and my retrieving figure. I paid them little attention. I couldn't concentrate. It was hard enough to keep my feet moving at an acceptable speed as I crossed the soggy grass to my first class. I wanted to run, really run, so fast that I would disappear, so fast that it would feel like flying. Part of me was flying already. I put the jacket on when I got to class, letting her fragrance swim thick around me. I would burn now, let the scent desensitize me, and it would be easier to ignore it later when I was with her again at lunch. It was a good thing that my teachers no longer bothered to call on me. Today might have been the day they caught me out, unprepared and answerless. My mind was in so many places this morning, only my body was in the classroom. Of course, I was watching Bella. That was becoming natural, as automatic as breathing, something I barely thought about consciously. I heard her conversation with the demoralized Mike Newton. She quickly directed the conversation to Jessica, and I grinned so wide that Rob Sawyer, who sat at the desk to my right, flinched visibly and slid deeper into his chair, away from me. Ugh, creepy. Well, I hadn't lost it entirely. I was also loosely monitoring Jessica, watching her refine her questions for Bella. I could barely wait for fourth period, 10 times as eager and anxious as the curious human girl who wanted fresh gossip. And I was listening to Angela Weber. I had not forgotten the gratitude I felt to her for thinking nothing but kind things toward Bella in the first place, and then for her help last night. So I waited through the morning looking for something she wanted. I assumed it would be easy. Like any other human, she must desire some bauble or toy, several probably. I would deliver something anonymously and call us even. But Angela proved almost as unaccommodating as Bella with her thoughts. She was oddly content for a teenager. Happy. Perhaps this was the reason for her unusual kindness. She was one of those rare people who had what she wanted and wanted what she had. If she wasn't paying attention to her teachers and her notes, she was thinking of the twin little brothers she was taking to the beach this weekend, anticipating their excitement with almost maternal pleasure. She cared for them often, but was not resentful of this fact. It was very sweet, but not really helpful to me. There had been something she wanted. There had to be something she wanted. I would just have to keep looking. But later, it was time for Bella's trigonometry class with Jessica. I wasn't watching where I was going as I made my way to English. Jessica was already in her seat, both her feet tapping impatiently as she waited for Bella to arrive. Conversely, once I settled into my assigned seat in the classroom, I became utterly still. I had to remind myself to fidget now and then to keep up the charade. It was difficult. My thoughts were so focused on Jessica's. I hoped she would pay attention, really try to read Bella's face from me. Jessica's tapping intensified when Bella walked into the room. She looks gloom. Why? Maybe there's something going on with Edward Cullen. That would be a disappointment, except then he's still available. If he's suddenly interested in dating, I don't mind helping out with that. Bella's face didn't look gloom. It looked reluctant. She was worried. She knew I would hear all this. Tell me everything, Jess demanded while Bella was still removing her jacket to hang it on the back of her seat. She was moving with deliberation, unwillingly. Ugh, she's so slow. Let's get to the juicy stuff. What do you want to know? Bella stalled as she took her seat. What happened last night? He bought me dinner, and then he drove me home. And then? Come on, there has to be more than that. She's lying anyway, I know that. I'm going to call her on it. How did you get home so fast? I watched Bella roll her eyes at the suspicious Jessica. He drives like a maniac. It was terrifying. She smiled a tiny smile, and I laughed out loud, interrupting Mr. Mason's announcements. I tried to turn the laugh into a cough, but no one was fooled. Mr. Mason shot me an irritated look. But I didn't even bother to listen to the thought behind it. I was hearing Jessica. Huh, she sounds like she's telling the truth. Why is she making me pull this out of her? Word for word, word by word. I would be bragging at the top of my lungs. Was it like a date? Did you tell him to meet you there? Jessica watched confusion cross Bella's expression and was disappointed at how genuine it seemed. No, I was very surprised to see him there, Bella told her. What's going on? But he picked you up for school today? There has to be more to the story. Yes, that was a surprise too. He noticed I didn't have a jacket last night. That's not very fun, Jessica thought, disappointed again. I was tired of her line of questioning. I wanted to hear something I didn't already know. I hoped she wasn't so dissatisfied that she would skip the questions I was waiting for. So, are you going out again? Jessica demanded. He offered to drive me to Seattle Saturday because he thinks my truck isn't up to it. Does that count? He sure is going out of his way to, well, take care of her, sort of. There must be something there on his side, if not on hers. How could that be? Bella's crazy. Yes, Jessica answered Bella's question. Well, then yes, Bella concluded. Wow, Edward Cullen, whether she likes him or not. This is major. I know, Bella sighed. The tone of her voice encouraged Jessica. Finally, she sounds like she gets it. I wondered if Jessica was reading Bella's tone correctly. I wished she would ask Bella to explain what she meant instead of assuming. Wait, Jessica said, suddenly remembering her most vital question. Has he kissed you? Please say yes, and then describe every second. No, Bella mumbled, and then she looked down at her hands, her face falling. It's not like that. Damn, I wish. Looks like she does too. I frowned. Bella did look upset about something, but it couldn't be disappointment, as Jessica assumed. She couldn't want that. Not knowing what she knew, she couldn't want to be that close to my teeth. For all she knew, I had fangs. I shuddered. Do you think Saturday? Jessica prodded. Bella looked even more frustrated. She said, I really doubt it. Yeah, she does. That sucks for her. Was it because I was watching all this through the filter of Jessica's perceptions that it seemed as though she was right? For a half second, I was distracted by the idea, the impossibility of what it would be like to try to kiss Bella, my lips to her lips, cold stone to warm, yielding silk. And then she dies. I shook my head, wincing and refocused. What did you talk about? Did you talk to him? Or did you make him drag every ounce of information out of you like this? I smiled ruefully. Jessica wasn't far off. I don't know, Jess. Lots of stuff. We talked about the English essay a little. A very little. I smiled wider. Oh, come on! Please, Bella, give me some details. Bella deliberated for a moment. Well, okay, I've got one. You should have seen the waitress flirting with him. It was over the top, but he didn't pay any attention to her at all. What a strange detail to share. I was surprised Bella had even noticed. It seemed an inconsequential thing. Interesting. That's a good sign. Was she pretty? Jessica thought more of it than I did. Very, Bella told her, and probably 19 or 20. Jessica was momentarily distracted by a memory of Mike on their date on Monday night, Mike being a little too friendly with a waitress whom Jessica did not consider pretty at all. She shoved the memory away and, stifling her irritation, returned to request for details. Even better, he must like you. I think so. Bella said slowly, and I was on the edge of my seat, my body rigidly still. But it's hard to tell. He's always so cryptic. I must not have been as transparently obvious and out of control as I'd thought. Still, observant as she was, how could she not realize that I was in love with her? I sifted through our conversation, almost surprised that I hadn't said the words out loud. It felt as though that knowledge was the subtext of every communication between us. Wow, how did you sit there across from a male model and make conversation? I don't know how you're brave enough to be alone with him, Jessica said. Shock flashed across Bella's face. Why? Weird reaction. Why does she think I meant? He's so, what's the right word? Intimidating. I wouldn't know what to say to him. I couldn't even speak English to him today, and all he said was good morning. I must have sounded like such an idiot. Bella smiled. I do have some trouble with incoherency when I'm around him. She must be trying to make Jessica feel better. She was almost unnaturally self-possessed when we were together. Oh well, Jessica sighed. He is unbelievably gorgeous. Bella's face was suddenly colder. Her eyes flashed the same way they did when she resented some injustice. Jessica didn't process the change in her expression. There's a lot more to him than that, Bella snapped. Ooh, now we're getting somewhere. Really? Like what? Bella gnawed her lip for a moment. I can't explain it right, she finally said. But he's even more unbelievable behind the face. She looked away from Jessica, her eyes slightly unfocused, as if she was staring at something very far away. I was reminded of how it felt when Carlisle or Esme praised me beyond what I deserved. This emotion was similar, but more intense, more consuming. Sell stupid somewhere else. There's nothing better than that face, unless it's his body. Swoon. Is that possible? Jessica giggled. Bella didn't turn. She continued to stare into the distance, ignoring Jessica. A normal person would be gloating. Maybe if I keep the question simple. Like I'm talking to a kindergartner. So you like him, right? I was rigid again. Bella didn't look at Jessica. Yes. I mean, do you really like him? Yes. Well, look at that blush. How much do you like him? Jessica demanded. The English room could have gone up in flames and I wouldn't have noticed. Bella's face was bright red now. I can almost feel the heat from the mental picture. Too much, she whispered. More than he likes me, but I don't see how I can help that. Shoot! What did Mr. Varner just ask? Which number, Mr. Varner? It was good that Jessica could no longer quiz Bella. I needed a minute. What on earth was the girl thinking now? More than he likes me? How did she come up with that? But I don't see how I can help that. What was that supposed to mean? I couldn't fit a rational explanation into the words. They were practically senseless. It seemed I couldn't take anything for granted. Obvious things that made perfect sense, somehow got twisted up and turned backward in that bizarre brain of hers. I glared at the clock, gritting my teeth. How could a mere minute feel so impossibly long to an immortal? Where was my perspective? My jaw tightened throughout Mr. Varner's entire trigonometry lesson. I heard more of that than the lecture in my own class. Bella and Jessica didn't speak again, but Jessica peeked at Bella several times and once noticed that her face was brilliant scarlet again for no apparent reason. Lunch couldn't come fast enough. I wasn't sure whether Jessica would get some of the answers I was waiting for when the class was over, but Bella was quicker than she was. As soon as the bell sounded, Bella turned to Jessica. In English, Mike asks me if you said anything about Monday night, Bella said, a smile pulling at the corners of her lips. I understood this for what it was, offense, as the best defense. Mike asked about me? Joy made Jessica's mind suddenly unguarded, softer, without its usual snide edge. You're kidding! What did he say? That was all I was going to get from Jessica today. Clearly, Bella was smiling, as though she was thinking the same thing, as though she'd won the round. Well, lunch would be another story. I moved apathetically through gym class with Alice, the way we always moved when it came to physical activity with humans. She was my teammate. Naturally, no one human would ever choose to partner with one of us. It was the first day of badminton. I sighed with boredom, swinging the racket in slow motion to tap the birdie back to the other side. Laura Mallory was on the other team. She missed. Alice was twirling her racket like a baton, staring at the ceiling. She took a step closer to the net, and Lauren flinched 2 steps back. We all hated Jim, Emmett especially. Throwing games was an affront to his personal philosophy. Jim seemed worse today than usual. I felt just as irritated as Emmett always did. Before my head could explode with impatience, Coach Clapp called the games and sent us out early. I was ridiculously grateful that he'd skipped breakfast. A fresh attempt to diet and the consequent hunger had him in a hurry to leave campus to find a greasy lunch somewhere. He promised himself he would start over tomorrow. This gave me enough time to get to the math building before Bella's class ended. "Enjoy yourself," Alice saw as she headed off to meet Jasper. Just a few more days to be patient. I suppose you won't say hi to Bella for me, will you?" I shook my head, exasperated. Were all psychics so smug? "FYI, it's going to be sunny on both sides of the Sound this weekend. You might want to rearrange your plans." I sighed as I continued to the opposite direction. Smug, but definitely useful. I leaned against the wall by the door, waiting. I was close enough that I could hear Jessica's voice through the bricks, as well as her thoughts. You're not sitting with us today, are you? She looks all lit up. I bet there's tons she didn't tell me." "I don't think so," Bella answered, oddly unsure. Hadn't I promised to spend lunch with her? What was she thinking? They came out of the classroom together, and both girls' eyes widened when they saw me. But I could only hear Jessica. "Nice. Wow. Oh yeah, there's more going on here than she's telling me. See you later, Bella." Bella walked toward me, pausing a step away, still unsure. Her skin was pink across her cheekbones. I knew her well enough by now to be sure that there was no fear behind her hesitation. Apparently, this was about some gulf she imagined between her feelings and mine. More than he likes me. Absurd! "Hello?" I said, my voice a tad curt. Her face got brighter pink. "Hi." She didn't seem inclined to say anything else, so I led the way to the cafeteria and she walked silently beside me. The jacket had worked. Her scent was not the blow it usually was. It was just an intensification of the pain I already felt. I could ignore it more easily than I once would have believed possible. Bella was restless as we waited in line, toying absently with the zipper on her jacket and shifting nervously from foot to foot. She glanced at me often, but whenever she met my gaze, she looked down as if embarrassed. Was this because so many people were staring at us? Maybe she could hear the loud whispers. The gossip was verbal as well as mental today. Or maybe she realized from my expression that I was going to want some explanations. She didn't say anything until I was assembling her lunch. I didn't know what she liked. Not yet. So I grabbed one of everything. "What are you doing?" she hissed in a low voice. "You're not getting all that for me?" I shook my head and shoved the tray up to the register. "Half is for me, of course." She raised one eyebrow skeptically, but said nothing more as I paid for the food and escorted her to the table we'd sat at last week. It seemed like much more than a few days ago. Everything was different now. She sat across from me again. I pushed the tray toward her. "Take whatever you want," I encouraged. She picked up an apple and twisted it in her hands, a speculative look on her face. "I'm curious." "What a surprise." "What would you do if someone dared you to eat food?" She continued in a low voice that wouldn't carry to human ears, and mortal ears were another matter if those ears were paying attention. I frowned. "You're always curious," I complained. "Oh well, it wasn't as though I hadn't had to eat before. It was part of the charade, an unpleasant part." I reached for the closest thing and held her eyes while I bit off a small piece of whatever it was. Without looking, I couldn't tell. It was as slimy and chunky and repulsive as any other human food. I chewed swiftly and swallowed, trying to keep the grimace off my face. The gob of food moved slowly and uncomfortably down my throat. I sighed as I thought of how I would have to choke it back up later. Disgusting! Bella's expression was shocked, impressed. I wanted to roll my eyes. Of course we would have perfected such deceptions. "If someone dared you to eat dirt, you could, couldn't you?" Her nose wrinkled, and she smiled. "I did once. On a dare. It wasn't so bad." I laughed. I suppose I'm not surprised. "How could he? That selfish jackass! How could he do this to us?" Rosalie's piercing mental shriek broke through my humor. "Easy, Rose," I heard Emmett whisper from across the cafeteria. His arm was around her shoulders, holding her tight into his side, restraining her. "Sorry, Edward," Alice thought guiltily. She could tell Bella knew too much from your conversation And well, it would have been worse if I hadn't told her the truth right away. Trust me on that. I winced at the mental picture that followed, and what would have happened if I'd admitted to Rosalie that Bella knew I was a vampire when we were at home, where Rosalie didn't have a facade to keep up. I'd have to hide my Aston Martin somewhere out of state if she didn't calm down by the time school was over. The sight of my favorite car mangled and burning was upsetting, though I knew I'd earned the retribution. Jasper was not much happier. I'd deal with the others later. I only had so much time allotted to be with Bella, and I wasn't going to waste it. Edward and Bella look cozy, don't they? As I tried to ignore Rosalie. Edward and Bella look cozy, don't they? As I tried to ignore Rosalie, Jessica's thoughts intruded. This time I didn't mind the interruption. Good body language. I'll give Bella my take later. He's leaning toward her just the way he should if he's interested. He looks interested. He looks perfect. Jessica sighed. Yum. I met Jessica's curious eyes, and she looked away nervously, cringing back into her seat. Probably better stick to Mike. Reality, not fantasy. Little time had passed, but Bella had noticed my abstraction. Jessica's analyzing everything I do, I said, using the lesser distraction as my excuse. She'll break it down for you later. Rosalie's outrage continued, a caustic inner monologue that barely paused for a second or two as she searched her memory for fresh insults to hurl my way. I forced the sound into the background, determined to be present with Bella. I pushed the plate of food back toward Bella. Pizza, I realized, wondering how best to begin. My former frustration flared as her words repeated in my head. More than he likes me, but I don't see how I can help that. She took a bite from the same slice of pizza. It amazed me how trusting she was. Of course, she didn't know I was venomous. Not that sharing food would hurt her. Still, I expected her to treat me differently, as something other. She never did. I would start off gently. So the waitress was pretty, was she? She raised the eyebrow again. You really didn't notice? As if any woman could hope to capture my attention from Bella. Absurd again. No, I wasn't paying attention. I had a lot on my mind. Poor girl, Bella said, smiling. She liked that I hadn't found the waitress interesting in any way. I could understand that. How many times did I imagine crippling Mike Newton in the biology room? But she couldn't honestly believe that her human feelings, the fruition of 17 short mortal years, could be stronger than this demolition ball of emotion that had wrecked me after a century of emptiness. Something you said to Jessica. I couldn't keep my voice casual. Well, it bothers me. She was immediately on the defensive. I'm not surprised you heard something you didn't like. You know what they say about eavesdroppers. Eavesdroppers never hear any good of themselves. That was the saying. I warned you I would be listening, I reminded her, and I warned you didn't want to know everything I was thinking. Ah, she was thinking of when I'd made her cry. Remorse made my voice thicker. You did. You aren't precisely right, though. I do want to know what you're thinking. Everything. I just wish that you wouldn't be thinking some things. More half-lies. I knew I shouldn't want her to care about me, but I did. Of course I did. That's quite a distinction, she grumbled, scowling at me. But that's not really the point at the moment. Then what is? She leaned toward me, her hand cupped lightly around her throat. It drew my eye, distracted me. How soft that skin must feel. Focus, I commanded myself. Do you truly believe that you care more for me than I do for you? I asked. The question sounded ridiculous to me, as though the words were scrambled. She froze for a moment. Even her breathing stopped. Then she looked away, blinking quickly. Her breath came in a low gasp. You're doing it again, she murmured. What? Dazzling me, she admitted, meeting my eyes warily. Oh, I wasn't quite sure what to do about that. I was still thrilled that I could dazzle her, but it wasn't helping the progress of the conversation. It's not your fault. It's not your fault, she sighed. You can't help it. Are you going to answer the question? I demanded. She stared at the table. Yes. That was all she said. Yes, you are going to answer, or yes, you really think that? I asked impatiently. Yes, I really think that, she said without looking up. There was a faint undertone of gloom in her voice. She blushed again and her teeth moved unconsciously to worry her lip. Abruptly, I realized that this was very hard for her to admit because she truly believed it, and I was no better than that coward Mike, asking her to confirm her feelings before I'd confirmed my own. It didn't matter that I'd made my side abundantly clear. It hadn't gotten through to her, and so I had no excuse. You're wrong, I promised. She must hear the tenderness in my voice. Bella looked up to me, her eyes opaque, giving nothing away. You can't know that, she whispered. What makes you think so? I wondered. I inferred that she thought I was underestimating her feelings because I couldn't hear her thoughts. But in truth, the problem was that she was grossly underestimating mine. She stared back at me, furrowing her brows, teeth against her lip. For the millionth time, I wished desperately that I could just hear her. As I was about to start begging, she held up a finger to keep me from speaking. Let me think, she requested. As long as she was simply organizing her thoughts, I could be patient. Or I could pretend to be. She pressed her hands together, twining and untwining her slender fingers. She watched her hands as if they belonged to someone else while she spoke. Well, aside from the obvious, she murmured, sometimes I can't be sure. I don't know how to read minds, but sometimes it seems like you're trying to say goodbye when you're saying something else. She didn't look up. She'd caught that, had she? Did she realize that it was only weakness and selfishness that kept me here? Did she think less of me for that? Perceptive, I breathed, and then watched in horror as pain twisted her expression. I hurried to contradict her assumption. That's exactly why you're wrong, though, I began, and then paused, remembering the first words of her explanation. They bothered me, though I didn't understand them. What do you mean, the obvious? Well, look at me, she said. I was looking. All I ever did was look at her. I'm absolutely ordinary, she explained. Well, except for the bad things like all the near-death experiences and being so clumsy that I'm almost disabled. And look at you. She fanned the air toward me, like she was making some point so obvious it wasn't worth spelling out. She thought she was ordinary. She thought that I was somehow preferable to her. In whose estimation? Silly, narrow-minded, blind humans like Jessica or Miss Cope? How could she not realize that she was the most beautiful, the most exquisite? Those words weren't even enough, and she had no idea. You don't see yourself very clearly, you know, I told her. I'll admit you're dead on about the bad things. I laughed humorously. I did not find the evil fate who hunted her comical. The clumsiness, however, was sort of funny. Sweet. Would she believe me if I told her she was beautiful inside and out? Perhaps she would find corroboration more persuasive. But you didn't hear what every human male in this school was thinking on your first day. Ah, the hope, the thrill, the eagerness of those thoughts, the speed with which they turned to impossible fantasies. Impossible because she wanted none of them. I was the one she said yes to. My smile must have been smug. Her face was blank with surprise. I don't believe it, she mumbled. Trust me just this once. You are the opposite of ordinary. She wasn't used to compliments. I could see that. She flushed and changed the subject. But I'm not saying goodbye. But I'm not saying goodbye. Hold on. Who's speaking here? Okay. Yeah. Okay. She's saying I'm not saying goodbye. Okay. But I'm not saying goodbye. Don't you see? That's what proves me right. I care the most because if I can do it, would I ever be unselfish enough to do the right thing? I shook my head in despair. I would have to find the strength. She deserved a life, not what Alice had seen coming for her. If leaving is the right thing to do, and it had to be the right thing, didn't it? Bella didn't belong with me. She'd done nothing to deserve my underworld. Then I'll hurt myself to keep from hurting you, to keep you safe. As I said the words, I willed them to be true. She glared at me. Somehow my words had angered her. And you don't think I would do the same? She demanded furiously. So furious. So soft and fragile. How could she ever hurt anyone? You'd never have to make that choice. You'd never have to make the choice, I told her, depressed anew by the vast difference between us. She stared at me, concern replacing the anger in her eyes and bringing out the little pucker between them. There was something truly wrong with the order of the universe if someone so good and so breakable did not merit a guardian angel to keep her out of trouble. Well, I thought with dark humor, at least she has a guardian vampire. I smiled. How I loved my excuse to stay. Of course, keeping you safe is beginning to feel like a full-time occupation that requires my constant presence. She smiled, too. No one has tried to do away with me today, she said lightly, and then her face turned speculative for half a second before her eyes went opaque again. Yet, I added dryly. Yet, she agreed. To my surprise, I'd expected her to deny any need for protection. Across the cafeteria, Rosalie's complaints were gaining in volume rather than dwindling. Sorry, Alice thought again. She must have seen me wince. But hearing her reminded me that I had some business to attend to. I have another question for you, I said. Shoot, Bella said, smiling. Do you really need to go to Seattle this Saturday, or was that just an excuse to get out of saying no to all your admirers? She scowled at me. You know, I haven't forgiven you for the Tyler thing yet. It's your fault that he's deluded himself into thinking I'm going to prom with him. Oh, he would have found a chance to ask you without me. I just really wanted to watch your face. I laughed now, remembering her aghast expression. Nothing I told her about my own dark story had ever made her look so horrified. If I'd asked you, would you have turned me down? Probably not, she said, but I would have canceled later, faked an illness, or sprained an ankle. How strange. Why would you do that? She shook her head, as if she was disappointed that I did not understand at once. You've never seen me in gym, I guess, but I would have thought that you would understand. Ah, are you referring to the fact that you can't walk across a flat, stable surface without finding something to trip over? Obviously, that wouldn't be a problem. It's all in the leading. For a brief fraction of a second, I was overwhelmed by the idea of holding her in my arms at a dance, where she would surely wear something pretty and delicate rather than this hideous sweater. With perfect clarity, I remembered how her body had felt under mine after I'd thrown her out of the way of the oncoming van, stronger than the panic or the desperation. I could remember that sensation. She had been so warm and so soft, fitting easily into my own stone shape. I wrenched myself back from the memory. But you never told me, I said quickly, preventing her from arguing with me as she clearly intended to do. Are you resolved on going to Seattle, or do you mind if we do something different? Devious, giving her a choice without giving her the option of getting away from me for the day. Hardly fair, but I had made her a promise last night. Too casually, too thoughtlessly, but still, if I was ever going to earn the trust she'd given me, despite my unworthiness, I would have to keep every promise I could, even if the idea terrified me. The sun would be shining Saturday. I could show her the real me. If I was brave enough to endure her horror and disgust, I knew just the place to take such a risk. I'm open to alternatives, Bella said, but I do have a favor to ask. A qualified yes. What would she want from me? What? Can I drive? Was this her idea of humor? Why? Well, mostly because when I told Charlie I was going to Seattle, he specifically asked if I was going alone, and at the time I was. If he asked again, I probably wouldn't lie, but I don't think he will ask again, and leaving my truck at home would just bring up the subject unnecessarily. And also because your driving frightens me. I rolled my eyes at her. Of all the things about me that could frighten you, you worry about my driving. Truly, her brain worked backward. I shook my head, disgusted. Why couldn't she fear the right things? Why couldn't I want her to? I wasn't able to keep up the playful tone of our banter. Won't you want me to tell your father that you're spending the day with me? I asked, the darkness seeping into my voice as I thought of all the reasons that was important, already guessing what her answer would be. With Charlie, less is always more, Bella said, certain of this fact. Where are we going anyway? The weather will be nice, I told her slowly, fighting the panic and the indecision. How much would I regret this choice? So I'll be staying out of the public eye. And you can stay with me, if you'd like to. Bella caught the significance at once. Her eyes were bright and eager. And you'll show me what you meant. About the sun? Maybe, like so many times before, her reaction would be the opposite of what I expected. I smiled at that possibility, struggling to return to the lighter moment. Yes, but she hadn't said yes. If you want to be alone with me, I'd still rather you didn't go to Seattle by yourself. I shuddered to think of the trouble you could find in a city that size. Her lips pressed together. She was offended. Phoenix is 3 times bigger than Seattle, just in population. In physical size, But apparently your number wasn't up in Phoenix, I said, cutting off her justifications. So I'd rather you stayed near me. She could stay forever, and it would not be long enough. I shouldn't think that way. We didn't have forever. The passing seconds counted more than they ever had before. Each second changed her, while I remained untouched, physically at least. As it happens, I don't mind being alone with you, she said. No, because her instincts were backward. I know, I sighed. You should tell Charlie, though. Why in the world would I do that? She asked, appalled by the idea. I glared at her, though the anger was, as usual, directed at myself. How I wished I had a different answer for her. To give me some small incentive to bring you back, I hissed. She should give me that much. One witness to compel me to be cautious. Bella swallowed loudly and stared at me for a long moment. What did she see? I think I'll take my chances, she said. Ugh! Did she get some thrill out of risking her life? Some shot of adrenaline she craved? Will you shut up? Rosalie's mental scream peaked, breaking into my absorption. I saw what she thought of this conversation, of exactly how much Bella already knew. I glanced back automatically to see Rosalie glowering furiously, but I realized I simply did not care. Let her destroy the car. It was just a toy. Let's talk about something else, Bella suggested suddenly. I looked back at her, wondering how she could be so oblivious to what really occurred, to what really counted. Why wouldn't she see me for the monster I was? Rosalie certainly did. What do you want to talk about? Her eyes darted left and then right, as if checking to make sure there were no eavesdroppers. She must be planning to introduce another myth-related topic. Her gaze froze for a second, and her body stiffened, and then she looked back to me. Why did you go to that Goat Rocks place last weekend? To hunt? Charlie said it wasn't a good place to hike because of bears. So oblivious. I stared at her, raising one eyebrow. Bears? She gasped. I smiled wryly, watching that sink in. Would this make her take me seriously? Would anything? Just tell her everything. It's not like we have rules. Rosalie's thoughts hissed at me. I struggled to not hear her. Bella pulled her expression tighter. You know, bears are not in season, she said, severely narrowing her eyes. If you read carefully, the laws only cover hunting with weapons. She lost control over her face again for a moment. Her lips fell open. Bears? She said again, a tentative question this time rather than a gasp of shock. Grizzly is Emmett's favorite. I watched her eyes as she worked through the astonishment and recovered. She murmured. She took a bite of the pizza, looking down. She chewed thoughtfully and then took a drink. So, she said, finally looking up, what's your favorite? I suppose I should have expected something like that, but I hadn't. Mountain lion, I answered brusquely. Ah, she said in a neutral tone. Her heartbeat continued steady and even, as if we were discussing a favorite restaurant. Fine then, if she wanted to act like this was nothing unusual. Of course we have to be careful not to impact the environment with injudicious hunting, I told her, my voice detached and clinical. We try to focus on areas with an overpopulation of predators, ranging as far away as we need. There's always plenty of deer and elk here, and they'll do, but where's the fun in that? She listened with a politely interested expression, as if I were a guide in a museum describing a painting. I had to smile. Where indeed, she murmured calmly, taking another bite of pizza. Early spring is Emmett's favorite bear season. I continued in the same tone. They're just coming out of hibernation, so they're more irritable. 70 years later, and he still hadn't gotten over losing that first match. Nothing more fun than an irritated grizzly bear, Bella agreed, nodding solemnly. I couldn't hold back a chuckle as I shook my head at her illogical calm. It had to be put on. Tell me what you're really thinking, please. I'm trying to picture it, but I can't, she said, the crease appearing between her eyes. How do you hunt a bear without weapons? Oh, we have weapons, I told her, and then flashed her a wide smile. I expected her to recoil, but she was very still, watching me. Just not the kind they consider when writing hunting laws. If you've ever seen a bear attack on television, you should be able to visualize Emmett hunting. She glanced toward the table where the others sat and shuddered. Finally, and I laughed at myself because I knew part of me was wishing she would stay oblivious. Her dark eyes were wide and deep as she stared at me now. Are you like a bear too? She asked in an almost whisper. More like the lion. Or so they tell me, I told her, striving to sound detached again. Perhaps our preferences are indicative. Her lips pulled up a tiny bit at the corners. Perhaps, she repeated, and then her head leaned to the side, and curiosity was easy to read in her eyes. Is it something I might get to see? For a moment, it was so clear in my head, Bella's crumpled, bloodless body in my arms, as though I were the one who had seen the vision, rather than just watching it in Alice's mind. But I didn't need foresight to illustrate this horror. The conclusion was obvious. Absolutely not! I snarled at her. She jerked away from me, shocked and frightened by my sudden rage. I leaned back, too, wanting to put space between us. She was never going to see, was she? She wouldn't do one thing to help keep her alive. Too scary for me? She asked, even-voiced. Her heart, however, was still moving in double time. If that were it, I would take you out tonight, I retorted through my teeth. You need a healthy dose of fear. Nothing could be more beneficial for you. Then why? She demanded, undeterred. I glared at her blackly, waiting for her to be afraid. I was afraid. Her eyes remained curious, impatient. Nothing more. She waited for her answer, not giving in. But our hour was up. Later, I snapped, and I rose to my feet. We're going to be late. She looked around, disoriented, as though she'd forgotten we were at lunch. As though she'd forgotten we were even at school, and was surprised that we were not alone in some private place. I understood that feeling exactly. It was hard to remember the rest of the world when I was with her. She got up quickly, bobbling once, and threw her bag over her shoulder. Later then, she said, and I could see the determination in the set of her mouth. She would hold me to that. Oh, man. Okay. So this chapter obviously was an interesting one because obviously quite a few things are revealed here. Obviously the most visceral reaction to Edward revealing the secret came from Rosalie. I mean, she called him an inconsiderate jackass, which he is. I'm not gonna lie, Edward, you really are an inconsiderate jackass if you're the one spilling secrets out and breaking every single rule. Like, Rosalie, she has every kind of single right to be pissed off at you, I can say. I agree with that, absolutely, that Rosalie, she's got every reason to be pissed right now. Like, I don't like that she's acting this way, but I also understand why she's pissed, and I can completely get it. Like, let's not pretend that there's rules to be followed, Edward. Come on, Edward. Seriously? And you're right, you should hide your Aston Martin out of the state. Hide it out of the country while you're at it. But in the end, he decides it's just a toy. His favorite car, an Aston Martin. Yeah, look up what those things look like. Actually, I'm gonna make a YouTube short talking about this as soon as this recording is done. But what I also like about this chapter is that we get the name of the guy that Carlisle sedated the other night, and like, we find out that he took him to Portland. We find out that Carlisle took the guy Lanny out to, like, Portland, Oregon to get him arrested by the cops because he apparently was wanted in several other states. So, of course, Carlisle, like, did the good thing and he took the guy out of state, which, I mean, I guess you could say it's better that way because at the very least, like, he's gonna get incarcerated. So at least, you know, that's one less serial rapist and murderer off the street, you know? But I do have to say that what was kind of interesting about this chapter was how Edward is, like, eavesdropping on the thoughts of Jessica Stanley here. And, of course, you know, Jessica Stanley, obviously, she's always going to look for gossip no matter which way she gets it. So of course, Edward, you know, watching Bella through Jessica's thoughts, you know, it makes him really wonder, you know, like, why the heck is it that Bella feels that she cares for me, cares more for me than I do for her? And of course, like, Bella gives him that explanation, but she has zero, like, knowledge of how beautiful Edward truly finds her to be, because she just doesn't see the attraction that she holds for all of the males in the school, you know, of course, all the sheep-like males want to be with her for the most superficial of reasoning, of course, because they think she's absolutely gorgeous. But Edward, you know, the fact of the matter is that he sees her in a completely different light than half of the boys in the school itself. But what I also love about this chapter, though, is how he's examining Angela Weber's thoughts, and obviously, you know, him being grateful to Angela for being such a good person, like a naturally kind person who's just content with everything she has, and she wants nothing more out of it. She's not looking for anything more, and she's just content. She's just a naturally happy, good-natured person who just seems to have anything and everything that she could ever want. And Edward, you know, he's looking for a way to repay her for being just a kind person. And of course, this is what's gonna lead into him and Emmett working up a scheme to get Angela together with her boyfriend, Ben Chaney, whom you learn is she's going to begin dating by the end of Twilight. Because remember, it said that Angela was wrapped in the arms of Ben Chaney at the junior prom. Yeah, Edward and Emmett both had something to do with that. And you're going to find out exactly how they had something to do with that. But what I also love about this is oh man, there's just so many things I love about this chapter in general, and what I love about it is how it mirrors the chapter from Bella's perspective in the book, and how you really do get a view into Edward's mind of, like, everything that he's hearing from everybody. Like, he's hearing and seeing everything, all the gossip from every single one of his classmates, and of course his family is pissed at him, but, you know, they're gonna get over it eventually. Jasper's gonna get over it very quickly when he sees just how happy Edward and Bella make each other, and he's not gonna be able to resist a happy atmosphere with those two together. But what I also love about this here is how he's realizing, man, Bella, like, the fact that she's so accepting of him as an individual, that she is really sort of like the first human to really accept him as he is, and she accepts the fact that he's a blood drinker, and and the fact that she's, like, so casually accepts the fact that him and Emmett love to go out hunting grizzly bears in early spring, and, like, mountain lions too, and of course that's just something that Bella takes in the most casual of ways possible. Like, even in Eclipse, she even tells Edward, you know, have fun, you know, bag a few mountain lions for me. It's like she just knows what he needs, what he wants, and she knows that there's no fun for him in going for deer and elk when he could be going off to Northern California or Canada and getting much more aggressive game out there in areas like that. So of course, you know, the fact that she's so accepting here of him, just as he's, like, so accepting of her and who she is as an individual, it really shows how they really complement each other and how good they truly are for each other, even though Edward is in complete denial that he's any good for her. But of course, you know, that's just his own insecurities acting up. But they really are so good for each other because they both accept each other wholeheartedly. And that's just something that I feel everybody should look for in a romantic partner. Find that person that is going to accept you 100%, and you find that person that you're going to accept 100% unconditionally. And they're truly at that point now, I think, where the acceptance between them towards each other is just unconditional acceptance. And of course, like, but I also love this chapter because Edward talks about how painful gym class is for him, because Bella, gym class is painful for a whole other reason because of her clumsiness, right? But Edward hates it because he can't show off the full strength, the full speed. He can't do anything in there. He has to do it all at a human pace, and of course that's painful for him. Emmett especially, because Emmett is super competitive and he hates holding back too. But this chapter is definitely interesting, mostly because of how you see everything through Edward's eyes here. And of course, the next chapter is going to be even better. But of course, you know, the Aston Martin comment, I'm going to make a YouTube short about that to talk about that, of course. But next up is chapter 12, Complications. And then I believe the chapter that comes after that is where he starts asking her all of the questions, I believe. I do not know just yet, because these chapters are completely, like, obviously the filler chapters come. Okay, chapter 13 is when he starts asking her the personal questions, for the most part, about, like, what her favorite color is, and you get, like, full depth, full insight into, like, what music she likes, what movies she loves watching, what books she loves reading. And I'm so looking forward to that chapter, because there's definitely, you know, lots of ties there. And of course, Stephenie Meyer, you can see that she was definitely influenced by the Narnia books when designing Bella's character, particularly Lucy Pevensey. And I definitely do see shades of Lucy Pevensey in Bella the more that I read these books, like that unconditional, innocent acceptance of everything around her and just embracing it, the way how Lucy embraced the environment of Narnia so easily in that first Narnia book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And obviously you saw that in the movie as well too. But I think that's all that we're going to be doing for today. So if you guys happen to be brand new, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and also be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and also be sure to leave comments down below letting me know what you think of the video itself and the readings so far and everything. And I'll continue soon enough with chapter 12, which is called Complications. So God bless, happy viewing, and have a nice day, everyone. See ya!